this afternoon's plenary session, I'd like to introduce a video performance by Second Echo. The ensemble is By My Hand.
My name is Luke John Campbell, and I am also a director for By My Hand.
I started with the company, and Luke was really interested in figuring out what are the stories we're telling and why, and what are the perspectives on this world that we're sharing, and how, especially with somebody with an ensemble like Second Echo, are we celebrating the diversity of who we are.
It's just a chance to be myself with people that are genuine and appreciate that giving and those offers of connection and of dancing. I feel very much it's like something I have to do, and when I get in the room there's just this feeling or something that goes beyond. It's almost addictive. It's coming in and being recognized for who I am, and also being able to test those boundaries into what I want to be, and that's just really exciting.
For me, my emotion is happy, full of life. I am a born dancer, and dancing is in my blood. And sometimes nature calls me to dance.
This is Luke's first project as director of the company.
I'm very proud to be a director, I am, and also a teacher as well. By My Hand, that is based on the yin and the yang. It is the positive and the negative side. It is By My Hand is about the hand itself, inside the yin and yang.
By My Hand, it's a process of working through thoughts, and out of those working through thoughts, the sculpture becomes, it grows. It's a very dynamic piece. It's about connection. It's about the rope and the root-like structure of it, which takes on a life of its own. It's like it becomes another performer in the piece.
As soon as we started talking about rope, it was the idea of having music that's also coming from a design element which combines with a sound element. The reason why I suggested using these wires in here was so that you can actually have a kind of a choreography of musicians playing this thing, and because it is accessible, you can play it from underneath and above and backwards and forwards. So it does have some of the same function as the rope in the space, in that there's lots of different ways you can get entangled with it as an instrument.
Each time we come in to develop this piece, it's organic and it changes. I come in and every day I'm surprised, or every day I go on a slightly different journey with the ensemble. But it's like we know where we're going, and that exploration of the unknown. I think that's what By My Hand is becoming. It's a work in process, it's always becoming. And watching the way Luke realizes it as we go along and how the group realizes it as a whole is a really rewarding and quite challenging experience.
I think what is unique and beautiful about Second Echo is that nothing of what we do could be accomplished without everybody in the room. It requires us to be present and to find that space between what it is we're saying and what it is we're feeling to create exceptional theatre.
And I understand that Luke's here with us this afternoon, so if you'd like to stand up and we can... Excellent, well done. All right, so just before we start, I'd again like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we're meeting today and their elders past, present and emerging. I guess growing up in Hobart, I do remember I moved out here at a very young age. I was 3 or 4. Both my parents are from the East Midlands in the UK, and they came out to Australia because it's beautiful beaches, sunny weather. They've been here a couple of years, and in July 1986 it snowed to sea level. It's the most impressive snow event since 1921, and it just happened to be at the time when my dad had some family visiting from the UK, so they haven't been back for quite some time. I'm very sorry. I'd like to thank our sponsors. So our principal sponsor is the Royal Flying Doctor Service of Australia. Please visit their simulator just outside the hotel. It is quite exciting. And today's education sponsor is Charles Sturt University, and we heard from Megan Smith this morning. Also Hester Superannuation, Flinders University, the Australian Government Department of Health, Starlight Children's Foundation, Flinders NT, the Queensland Government Department of Health, North and West Remote Health, the Tasmanian Government Department of Health, Caring at Home, Monash University, Are You OK, the Lowitja Institute, and a big shout out to the University of Sydney School of Rural Health who are sponsoring tonight's networking drinks, so thank you. The Heart Foundation's Early Birds Walking Group will be meeting and walking again tomorrow morning, so if you're interested in doing that, meet them in the foyer at 6:30, it's in the morning. We're now going to move next door into the exhibition. Oh, that's for the end, Joe, don't do that. We'll save that till the end, All right. Now I'm standing off to this side of the lectern because there's a computer here which is reasonably precarious, and I've been promised that if I do disturb the computer, this will become a collaboration with our next presenter. Anne Cahill-Lambert is a consumer health advocate. She was one of the first female members of the MCC, the Melbourne Cricket Club, when the rules were changed to allow the other 50% of the population to have equal access to those facilities. This reflects Anne's lifetime work of addressing inequity and unfairness. Anne is a current board member for Benalla Health in Victoria. She was formerly the CEO of the Women's and Children's Hospitals. She worked to secure free oxygen for needy citizens and encourage greater participation in organ transplant schemes. Anne is here today because she's never forgotten the fact that, however mundane or specialised the healthcare service, the only thing that really matters is whether it works for patients or consumers and whether it's affordable, accessible, kind and of high quality. Please join me in welcoming Anne.
Well, that was a big lead up, wasn't it? Thank you very much for that, Joe. I wanted firstly, I'll just get this going for you. No, it'll go in a minute. I want to firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we meet on and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and those who are here today. As Joe said, I'm here to determinedly argue for equal and partnership role for patients, for consumers and their families in the health system. They are our greatest asset, and my advice to anyone who will listen, including you here in the room, is ignore them at your peril. We will have a much better health system all the way around if we work collaboratively and in partnership with our consumers and their families. While I'm on a number of boards and committees, and Joe mentioned some of them, I'm here representing those from the coalface today, not any particular organisation. So today I thought we'd look at the 30% of people who live in rural, regional and remote Australia and whether they have access as intended to the universal health system that we all know and love as Medicare. I, for one, know that postcode dictates whether they are disadvantaged in terms of access, equity and fairness. I know we have a way to travel to improve things, to ensure that the principles of our universal health system underpin the services to those in the bush. At the moment, it feels like we're in Bruce Salter's rickety little Mooney, which he'd be offended that I've described it that way, travelling a few feet above my lounge room in Benalla. Oh, and please visit the Benalla Health Desk. Big shout out to Janine and Anne-Marie. Benalla is not a rickety health service, it's fabulous. Stephen Duckett from the Grattan Institute has reminded us recently about the stuff that patients from rural, regional and remote Australia know intrinsically. And you've heard about lots of those KPIs this week, that standardised death rates are higher for these Australians when compared with their city pals, that the preventable death rate is higher in the bush, that there are lower rates of GP consultations in the bush, just to mention some of those indicators. These data are not just about the appalling health outcomes for Indigenous people. They are across the board. Part of the considerable health disadvantage suffered by people outside of major cities is around the effects of social determinants of health. I feel like a broken down record because you've heard about all this all week. Well, probably all your life if you're from the bush. Some of those social determinants include income, education and legal status. And Fran Baum has rightly spoken and reminded us about the problems that continue to exist while society is governed for profit rather than health and well-being. And this is especially so for rural folk. Actually, fun fact number one, less than a month ago, it was reported that around 21% of hospitals in the USA are at high risk of closing because of insolvency. And I fear that the lack of funding drives the provision of health services in the bush in Australia. I understand the concept of being fiscally responsible, but that doesn't mean ignoring 30% of Australians. Their health is as equally as important as the health and well-being of people in major cities. Did anyone know where that cemetery was, by the way? Glenelg. We're going to do a quick run through about Healthcare Systems 101, what the universal healthcare system is about. It includes everyone, everywhere, providing a high quality service with no financial hardship. This matches the World Health Organisation's definition of universal health care. It has a motive of equity and access. What the Medicare legislation doesn't include is an exclusion about people from rural, regional and remote Australia. And a reiteration of these concepts from the Victorian Department of Human Services Better Health Outcomes website. As you can see there, this is about what the taxpayer expects. Medicare will pick up the tab in this marvellous universal health system. But wait, how can this be? For some Australians who attend a rural hospital's urgent care centre, they may be charged by the GP who attends. These centres, known as emergency departments to the community, are part of the local public hospital. You can have facilities and nursing services at no charge. Forget for a moment that you do pay a tax called Medicare, but you can have this at no charge. But the moment a doctor turns up, there is a real possibility of being charged. One of my friends tells me he's routinely charged $231 each time he attends what you and I know as the emergency department. He's a frequent flyer with significant chronic conditions. He's attending a public emergency department, not a private one. If I happen to be staying around the corner from the Royal Hobart Hospital, which I am, develop pneumonia, which I hope I don't get, and turn up to the emergency department, no such charges will be levied. Is that fair, equitable, or transparent? Someone pointed out to me the other day that this is about, the clever stuff we all learned in the 70s about cost shifting from the state to the Commonwealth. If that were true, I mightn't care, because I'm more interested in the impact on the patient, despite my claims to being fiscally responsible. But the gap payment for my friend is around $200. So yes, the Commonwealth pays, but not much. We need to do better here. Fun fact number 2, this report was released from the Nuffield about 2 months ago, and it addresses the explicit evidence of the additional costs of running health services in rural areas. It recognises in particular the higher costs of staff recruitment and retention, the scale of fixed costs, and difficulties of achieving economies of scale. I'm sounding like a health economist, which I don't want to do. There are already formulae that exist in the UK that address what they call the unavoidable smallness of services, a term I actually love. We need a similar approach in Australia, where there is a transparent mechanism to compensate for rural costs rather than using historical costs plus or minus a bit. Given that unavoidable smallness tends to the concept that we can't have a lung transplant unit on every street corner, or deliver babies at every rural hospital, governments have a thing variously known as IPTAS, or the Patient Transport Assistance and Accommodation Scheme, which is about providing for those who have to travel to the city for their healthcare needs. The information blurb that goes with each jurisdiction's policy is always careful to state that it's a subsidy scheme rather than a reimbursement scheme. In what realm of possibility do we live in that says that's fair? It should be a reimbursement scheme. Often patients also have to pay a flagful before they get anything back, which is around $100. And this slide shows what you get from each state and territory and what it costs for a double room at the Y in each capital city. I think park benches are probably what you could really only afford. I'm told that not many people use the system. I tried it when I was waiting for a lung transplant, and I'd have to say I thought I'd die from the effort of the system rather than the condition I have. It's tortuous and involves getting your specialist to sign a form. The specialist has got to sign a form, usually in 3 places, just after she or he has told you you're about to die and you need to get your affairs in order. I gave up. Also, you have to submit all sorts of dockets to support your travel, yet a backbencher federal politician gets to keep their allocated allowance no matter how much they've spent on it. And that's what a federal politician gets each night if they're staying in one of those capital cities. Some hospitals have accommodation centres for patients, but often they don't work, because for many of these facilities you can't take your loved ones with you, and if you're about to cark it you probably want them there. You have to share a room, and if you've got accoutrements of illness such as an oxygen machine, well, that just won't work. And I won't mention car parking. The recent Federal Ministerial Committee report out on that was released before Christmas on out-of-pocket health expenses didn't mention these costs for rural patients who must attend hospitals in the city. It didn't mention the paying for attendance at an urgent care centre. Why is that? Why? They are a huge component, those costs. There was a 2007 Senate Community Affairs report entitled Highway to Health that addressed these inequities that are on this slide now. But since then, crickets. Might as well have been called Highway to Hell, mightn't it? Is now a good time to mention that the famous Sir Michael Marmot has said there can be no more important task for those concerned with the health of the population than to reduce inequity. Just let that sit in your brain for a while. No more important task. I want to touch briefly on the Senate's recent report on mental health services in rural and remote Australia. It looks to me like the report is bipartisan because there's no independent or minority reports at the back. So I hope whoever wins the next election will be able to implement the recommendations that include the important issue of the design of mental health services. I'm happy to say that I think the senators have probably got this right, and they never get such bouquets from me. They're recommending that such design should start with the local community so that it meets the community's requirements. They listen to the community, now they need to act with state and territory governments. Such a novel approach segues quite nicely into two movements that you all know about, and so do I. One of them is Hello, My Name Is, and the other one is shared decision making. On the former, how on earth can patients and families work together and collaboratively if they don't know the name of the person looking after them in the emergency department, on the ward or in the community health centre? It's courtesy 101 that our parents taught us. I say to all healthcare workers, wear your darn name badge up high so patients can know who they're dealing with. On the shared decision-making front, for me, again, it's stating the bleeding obvious. I know some of us come from another time, that's probably only you and me, Rod, where what the doctor said went. Doctor knew best and what doctor said went. However, doctor has rarely had such an informed community, thanks in large part to the irritating Dr. Google, that's from the doctor's point of view, and other technologies. I think shared decision-making and health literacy are intertwined. The latter has often been used to demean patients, and my response is always that it's up to clinicians and health service providers to make sure appropriate sources of information are provided. I note that the Consumer Health Forum is running a campaign called Be Health Aware. This is about being able to trust information and resources. What all this means is that people like Dr. Edwin Cruz, at Edwin K-A-U-Y-S, I think it is, Melissa, isn't it? He often goes against guidelines taught in medical school because he uses his patients as a guide. He talks to the patients about what they want, includes information about the pros and cons of available options, what the evidence is, and so forth. So he's not ignoring the evidence, he's just going down the path of where the patient will likely be compliant. What does the international literature tell us? Well, Canada is using what it calls the blockbuster drug of the century, which is patient engagement. They are trying to develop engagement-capable environments, and the idea is that organisational capacity will be built for patient and family engagement, where research and evaluation are also integrated. Well, isn't that novel? Canada's developing a program called the virtualisation of services. The people behind this have recognised long what I've been saying, and that is that privacy concerns around the use of email and other technologies, privacy concerns have been used as a smokescreen for far too long. They are doing things like insisting that every healthcare provider has a secure email address, which is a condition of their clinical registration. Virtual care is part of the funding system. That's the most important thing. Virtual care is part of the funding system. What I especially like about this project is that all agreements, healthcare plans and so on have to be considered through a modernisation lens. We have systems like this in some jurisdictions in Australia for human rights. It wouldn't be too difficult to do the same for technology, would it? Digital health is also seen as a discipline, as part of the healthcare system and not just the responsibility of someone at some arm's length agency. It's integral and not a separate adjunct service. This is my husband, Rod, up the front in the e-tug, and my son, Tom, in the glider. They have all their flying maps and weather details on apps on their phones, watches and iPads. The accuracy of these apps are life and death issues. We can surely get this right in health. More than 18 million Australians have a smartphone. It would be surprising indeed if most of those phones didn't have some app that records personal health data like my watch does. We know that the use of technology has changed how we work in most environments, and I'm still puzzled why it hasn't made a change in the way patients are able to interact with the health system. Is it because the health policy gurus have shares in fax machines? You young ones, if you don't know what one is, go to a GP and you'll find out. So my Apple Watch and my electronic gizmos are quite handy. I went to the GP last week and bugger, I had high blood pressure. I said, don't worry, I've spent 2 hours on the phone with Telstra, it'll always do it. And she said, oh no, I need a bit more than that. So I whipped out the iPad and showed her what my blood pressure had been doing for the last month. I also have my pulse oximetry readings recorded and my heart rate. So she was well happy with that, and we didn't fiddle with any drugs. Whereas Tom, my son, 28-year-old, he had a bit of tachycardia recently. He has a lousy family history. Both his parents are here before you as Exhibit A and B. Doctor was thinking about sending him off to a cardiologist. Tom says, oh, hey doc, I've got all my heart rate on my phone. Do you want to look at it? And he said, no, I don't believe in it. The technology to improve access and ergo health outcomes is in our hands virtually. The University of Southern California's Centre for Body Computing is developing apps with non-clinical and clinical experts so that they are patient-facing, a term I love, as well as safe, effective and accessible. They are focused on education, self-management and on-demand diagnostics. The theory is that healthcare becomes a more continuous experience that patients can access when they need it, rather than when the receptionist who's having a bad day decides that they can have it. The centre also has developed a virtual care clinic with a similar focus to the work going on in Canada, using mobile connectivity to enable patients to access health services, including what they call a tailored virtual physician. There was an item on the news last week about the anxiety in the US of the potential for errors as a result of using electronic records. Clinicians were complaining that firstly they had too many keystrokes in a day, and secondly they were worried about making errors with drop-down menus and so forth. But when they were asked what the alternative was, did they want to go back to paper? They said absolutely not, a resounding no there. Their conclusion was that patients needed to be able to work collaboratively with their treating clinicians to be alert to what's in the medical record, tests prescribed, drugs prescribed and so forth. I'm so glad that they've recognised that patients have a key role here. So the embracing of all this technology might go some way to address the workforce problems that especially face rural, regional and remote Australia. I believe it's unethical to take clinical staff from countries that need them too. Rather, can't we think about doing things differently? And I have a range of options, for example, in relation to midwifery care, for having some continuity of care so that the only disruption is the 24 hours of the actual delivery. There are plenty of reports out there, and you've heard about lots of them this week, about how we must do better for rural, regional and remote Australians, especially Indigenous people. But no one seems to be listening. We heard last week on Harmony Day that the gap between the health and wellbeing of Indigenous compared with non-Indigenous people is indeed widening. That's tragic. I would urge the National Rural Health Alliance and all other organisations here today and involved in this space to take off the gloves and recommit to making the lives of decision makers uncomfortable so that some equity can come to play for those in the bush. And I love all you decision makers. I'll love you to the end, but we need some change. This is one of my favourite nieces, Beck Goddard, standing there in between the fabulous Chelsea Randall and Erin Phillips from the Adelaide women's football team. So Beck was the inaugural premiership coach of the AFLW, and she brought a bunch of women together from Adelaide and Darwin. They weren't expected to have any role in this competition. She would talk to her team in terms of making opponents feel uncomfortable, rather than being arrogant and too optimistic about thrashing them. I like the concept of discomfort and think we too should be hammering home the inequity that exists for those outside of capital cities who are looking to us to improve things. If we work together, recognising what patients want and need, we might have a more robust system that provides for rural, regional and remote Australians. It will cope with the workforce shortage up to a point. It will use the technology. Ultimately, it will allow patients to be responsible for their health and well-being and to work with treating clinicians and others to be as well as they possibly can. That, my friends, would be a proper universal health system where postcode doesn't exclude 30% of patients from access, equity and transparency of processes. We are better together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was fantastic. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage Associate Professor Peter Sainsbury. He's the past chair of both the Climate and Health Alliance and the Public Health Association of Australia. Peter was, until his retirement recently in 2016, Director of Population Health in the southwestern Sydney Local Health District. He holds an adjunct professorial appointments at the Universities of Notre Dame, Sydney and New South Wales. His professional interests include health equity and the social determinants of health, environmental sustainability and healthy built environments. Peter is a past president of the Public Health Association of Australia and the Climate and Health Alliance. Other interests include figurative war memorials, cooking and eating, they do go hand in hand, the arts, cricket and Florence Nightingale. Peter encourages people to really look at your nearest war memorial and ask yourself, how does this make me feel? Is this relevant to this community today? Please give a warm Hobart welcome to Peter Sainsbury.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the National Rural Health Alliance for inviting me and for all of you to coming today. Start my timer. I'd like to pay my respects simply to oppressed people everywhere. When I give a talk, there's information on the overheads, but I'm not particularly bothered about you taking into account the information on the overheads. It's detail, it fills out the story. It's the story and the patterns and the recurrences that are of prime interest in what I want to get across. And what I want to get across today is very simple. I'm going to start with it, and that's climate change is real. If you don't think that's the case, then don't come and talk to me, because life's too short to talk to climate deniers, okay? If you're interested, I'll talk to you about anything today and tomorrow, but if you're a denier, don't bother. It's really, really, really serious. It's caused by humans. You know why, because the greenhouse gases we're pumping into the air have been for the last 200 years, but mainly now. If you're a baby boomer, we've pumped into the air about 85% since we were born of carbon dioxide. If you've been born in the last 30 years, it's about 50%. So it's us, it's not the Victorians. And it's a major threat. It's a major threat to the environment, but it's a major threat to humans, to human health. It's causing death, and it is an existential threat to the human species. Now, the bad news is it's getting worse. We're pumping more and more carbon dioxide into the air. We've already raised the temperature by a degree, and we're seeing the devastating effects. That's at 1 degree, and we're probably inevitably going to hit 2 degrees. That's inevitable almost, just with what's up there. The good news is we've got the technology to do better, we've got the money to do better, but unfortunately, we haven't got the political will to do better. And I'm not sure that we've got the capacity, our collective decision-making capacity is good enough. But nonetheless, we're slightly heading in the right direction, just at nowhere near enough at the right speed. There's lots of resistance to that change, and what I want you to take away today is that all of this is affecting your communities, and there's a role for you in trying to turn it all around. That's what all my message is about today. And I know this is important to you because I know you care about health, and I know that you care about rural Australia, whether that be coastal rural, rural in terms of farming areas, whether it be desert, whether it be mountainous areas. I suspect that that's where most of you live and you care about it. And I know you care about health. So this is really important to you. And I also know that you're aware of the changes that are happening. We see them, we've seen them this summer, to the climate in Australia, to devastating weather events that have caused lots of harm. So what I'm going to do today, really quickly, is talk about climate change, just a bit of a briefing, and I'm going to show you a 2-minute video from the Bureau of Meteorology for that. Then I'm going to take a slight detour to talk about the social determinants of health, because I'm not sure everyone really thinks about what social means. Then very, very briefly talk about the effects of climate change on health, and more importantly in some ways for you guys today, on health services, and then about how we can wrest control and start really moving things along at the pace that's required, which is phenomenally fast is what's required. Now, I've never before shown a video, and I hope this is going to work.
At the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO, we monitor, analyse and explain observed and future changes in Australia's climate. This is our 5th State of the Climate report. It focuses on observations and data that show how and why the climate is changing in Australia and around the globe. Australia has warmed by just over 1 degree since 1910, with most of that warming occurring since the 1950s. This means more frequent heat waves and increased bushfire risk, with more extreme fire weather and longer fire seasons, especially in southern and eastern Australia. Long-term changes in rainfall are also occurring. In the past few decades, northern wet season rainfall has overall been very much above average, whereas across southern Australia, there has been a decline in rainfall during April to October. These changes in temperature and rainfall are projected to continue. Overall temperatures will increase and periods of extreme heat will worsen. When combined with further decreases in rainfall, drought will be more likely and more severe, especially in parts of southern Australia. The warming trend is also observed in the oceans. The sea surface has warmed and contributed to marine heat waves, which have damaging impacts, such as coral bleaching in the Great Barrier Reef. Below the surface, the oceans have absorbed most of the extra heat in the Earth's system. Australia's Southern Ocean is a particular hotspot for heat uptake. Sea levels have risen and are projected to rise further in the future, which will increase coastal inundation and erosion, and risks damaging coastal infrastructure. The major driver of these changes to the climate is the increase in greenhouse gas concentrations in the air. Carbon dioxide is now above the 400 parts per million milestone, and all greenhouse gases combined have just crossed the milestone of 500 parts per million equivalent of carbon dioxide. These increases have resulted from human activities. For more information about our changing climate, including projected changes in your region, visit our websites.
Thank you to the AV people for helping me out there. So this is from early on. Now, can anyone tell me that those effects that were shown in that Bureau of Meteorology video aren't relevant to your bit of rural Australia? And this is the Bureau, right? These aren't some sort of radical lefty sort of revolutionaries. You know, these are pretty conservative people. But we look at rainfall, heat waves, sea level change, drought, fire. These are all relevant, and these are all going to affect rural communities, whether they be coastal or inland. They're going to affect people's ability to work outside. Not only farmers, lots of other people work outside. People's ability to keep cool inside, particularly at night, particularly poorer people. Going to affect crops. They're devastated in floods and heat waves and cyclones, but they're also the nutritional value and yield of crops goes down as the temperature goes up. That'll affect incomes with inevitable consequences on out-migration of younger people and the well-being of communities and so on. On the coast, threats to the Great Barrier Reef from warming and cyclones and so on, they'll affect the tourist industry, which employs far more people than mining along in Queensland, I can tell you. And all of this will affect community cohesion, your communities. This is very, very important. Now, I'm not going to say much about social determinants of health because we've had lots about it. These are the things. You understand what the social determinants are. And they're differentiated in my mind from these things that I simply call the traditional determinants of health. Things in the environment, and notice climate's there. Biological things, things we're born with and so on, and behavioral things. This is what health professionals, students usually learn about. And in more recent years, we've been learning about these things called social determinants of health. But why are they called social? They're not called social because they're fluffy. You can't measure it with a blood pressure machine. You can't measure it with a blood sample. It's not in your genes, so we call it social. That's not why it's called social. It's called social because it's created by the decisions we make collectively. Societal decisions create differences in income, differences in access to housing, discrimination against racial groups and so on. It's the structures and processes and institutions that we've set up in our decisions over now 12,000 years, but obviously most recently, that affect all of that. It's not natural in origin, and if you're a believer in a god or gods, it's not God-given. We've done it. That's the bad news. We've created these social problems and we potentially can correct them. That's what's really important. Okay? Now, very quickly now, I'm going to talk about climate change and health. And this is a big graph. There's loads of them you can find in books. I'm going to show you the top half and then the bottom half, and the bit in the middle links the two together. And what we can see here is that through various mechanisms that were highlighted in the video, and then through various influencing factors in our environment, in our communities, our socioeconomic status and so on, that these things through various pathways, through extreme weather events, heat, air quality, water quality, food supply, distribution of mosquitoes and so on, and social factors, that those climate influences work through these various pathways, middle's at the top now, to influence health through lots of things. So extreme weather events cause injuries and perhaps pollution of water and sewage breakdown. Heat causes heat-related illness and death, particularly in people with cardiovascular disease. Air quality, we know that affects heart conditions, respiratory conditions, even skin conditions. Water quality, again, it makes, if our water is polluted, we get bacteria and algae in them, which cause illness. Food supply, I mentioned earlier. Mosquito-carried diseases. And of course, social factors with a particular emphasis on mental health, which is particularly important in rural Australia. So there are multiple mechanisms through which climate change affects people's health and will influence the work of yourselves. But some people are more at risk than others. Not everyone is exposed the same, not everyone is vulnerable to the same extent, and not everyone has the same access to services. And so it isn't just the same for everybody. Some groups, again, those groups, all relevant to rural Australia, will be most affected. And I can't help but mention just this little this document that's on the Rural Health website, which is quite useful as a 2-page summary. So look to your own organisation for some further assistance here. Now, the point of going back to social determinants is that climate change and environmental degradation more generally, land clearing, pollution of the water with plastics, overfishing, biodiversity loss, those issues, climate change and environmental degradation, are not natural. They're humanly created. They are, just like income and gender and where you live and your social class, they are social determinants of health. We've created the problem. The good news is, if we act quickly, we can do something about ameliorating it. Now, quickly on effects on health services. So it's not just people's health that's going to suffer. If there was a hospital in the middle of this flood, it would be obvious that it would be flooded, that the flooding would probably knock out the electrical system and lots of other basic services that are underground or on the first level. That's what they found in New York and New Orleans. But even if the hospital's on the upper bits of land, the staff won't be able to get there to work. If supplies run short, you won't be able to get supplies. The electricity supply might have collapsed. The sewage system might have fallen apart. When an extreme weather event happens, hospitals and GP services and all sorts of services are going to be threatened. The same if there's a heat event, if there's a cyclone and so on. Extreme weather events pose a very serious threat to our health services. And we are pathetically prepared for that, mostly. There may be some exceptions, but not for the most part. And then apart from the extreme weather events, there's long-term changes. I talked about the effects on heart disease, skin diseases, asthma, changes in infections. How many health services are preparing for those changes in disease loads? Not many. And just as an aside, but a really important aside, we're part of the problem in the health services. It's our job to make people better and keep people healthy. We have an immense environmental footprint. Data from the USA and Britain indicates that 5% of a nation's greenhouse gases are generated by health services. A paper from Australia last year showed that in Australia it's 7%, same order of magnitude. We're killing people with what we do in our health services. We are creating the change that's killing people. So, what must we do? In the last 5 minutes or so, I want to try and suggest some activities that we as individuals and as health professionals can take. Now, broadly, there's 2 strategies. There's mitigation, desperately needed. We need to stop pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The gases that are up there are going to stay there for a long time, but we need to stop putting more up there through changing the way we generate energy, changing the way we move around, changing the buildings we live in, how we use our land. The second is all these effects I've been talking about to health and health services and the rest of society, they're inevitable. They're not going to go away in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We need to be preparing our health services, our communities, all our services for these changes. And I've suggested some areas there. The good news, again, is that when we do the right thing, there'll be co-benefits. If we encourage ourselves, our patients, our staff getting to and from work, our neighbours, our relatives to walk more, cycle more, use public transport, that reduces the carbon emissions we put out through burning fossil fuels. It also improves their health. It's a co-benefit. If we put solar panels on the roof of a health service, we reduce the carbon emissions, we improve the environment and people's health, and we save money. There's co-benefits galore from doing the right thing. Now, what can health services do? Well, there's 2 programs, well, one organisation, one programme, if you don't know about, I'd encourage you to join. There's the Climate and Health Alliance declaration, retired as president 6 months ago. The Climate and Health Alliance in Australia is there to help health professionals and health organisations be aware of climate change and prepare for it and counter it. So organisations, if you're a part of the Alliance, or even if you're not, of the Rural Health Alliance, look at joining the Climate and Health Alliance. If you're a health service, there's this fantastic worldwide programme called Global Green and Healthy Hospitals that'll really help you do the preparation work to prepare for climate change and also reduce your environmental footprint. The resources they offer online and seminars, webinars are phenomenal. Now, I've said lots of other things there. I'm not going to go through them, but you can start by doing a risk assessment. How exposed is your health service to the effects of climate change? And then develop a plan, allocate resources, and make someone responsible for it. Don't just tell everybody it's their job. They'll come on board if they get some support, but it's hard work when the organisation doesn't support individuals. But find champions. You can be a champion, find others. Health services have an immense role to play. Oh, and if you need some help, you can look at a paper that was published a few weeks ago by myself and a couple of colleagues, and a full issue of the Public Health Research and Practice Journal, again, just 2 or 3 months ago, focused on climate change in health. If you're a health professional, then start talking about it, learn about it. Talk about it with your patients when they come to see you. You talk about smoking or their blood pressure or their diet or domestic violence, all of which are important for health. Why wouldn't you talk about climate change and what they can do to try and improve their health and the health of their children and their grandchildren? Be an advocate. Consider environmental sustainability in all your clinical decision making. Is this test necessary? Is this drug necessary? Is this drug doing any good? Is the drug, when they're prescribing it, are they actually taking it? Or are they just taking it home and shoving it in the cupboard? Because what causes that 7% of greenhouse gas emissions that I talked about, that's not transport and power, that's what we do to patients and the things we buy, particularly drugs and medical equipment and so on. So think about that when you're making clinical decisions. 5 R's, reduce, reuse, etc. Become a champion and get some friends together at work. Form a little group, it's always easier when you're together. And as Harry said, monitor your progress. But basically, be a pain in the neck in your organisation. What can you do in your private life? Join the Climate and Health Alliance, join Greenpeace, join AYCC if you're under 30, join SEED, an Aboriginal organisation. Measure and reduce your carbon footprint. Don't let your money kill people. If you've got your money in a bank that invests in fossil fuels or a superannuation fund that invests in fossil fuels, your super is killing people. Advocate for them to go fossil fuel free or move to someone that is fossil fuel free. Donate money if you can't actually get active and demonstrate. Write to your MP. Go and see tell your MP, him or her, what you think about it. That this is important, and if you don't do what you say, you won't vote for them. But more importantly, don't just vote for any old MP. We want MPs who share our values. Get people to stand who share our values, not just some hack from a major party. Use your vote to create change and become a pain in the arse. Because if you don't, like the Smashing Pumpkins, despite all my rage, I'm just a rat in a fucking cage.
We've got 1 or 2 minutes. Do you want to talk about the war memorials for a minute? I've got enough. We've got a couple of minutes, and I couldn't let it go by. There was numerous photos of war memorials in the presentation. And, you know, I was thinking about what you said yesterday, because we spoke briefly yesterday, and you mentioned elements of your talk. But I think if we were talking about such an existential crisis as this in a different context, it would be perhaps discussed differently. I mean, to give an example of the Second World War, I can't imagine Churchill heard, you know, they're on the beaches, we think they're on the beaches. Well, I haven't seen evidence, and there's some elements of the party that don't quite believe that yet. We haven't seen live video footage or photographs. So I'll wait until we're 100% behind that. You know, massive risk, but we'll wait a bit longer. Oh, they might be in the streets now. I mean, I think, you know, the way we acknowledge that loss of life on a grand scale is kind of comical when you look at the challenges that we've got ahead. So that was what I thought. But.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, people are now saying what we need. The only time we've seen the changes in society and the changes in the economy that are required to make this change, because what we need to do, we need to stop fossil fuels increasing, we need to peak in 2020 and then reduce at 10% a year for the next 20 or 30 years, reduce by 50% by 2030 and zero by 2050. The only time societies and economies have changed of when they've gone to war, right? When Pearl Harbor was bombed, when Poland was invaded. They're the only times countries have done that, and that's what's needed. Now, sorry, they've gone. I don't know if you noticed, but I got interested in figurative war memorials because they show quite different emotions. Some are very like this, just at the graveside, very restrained. Some are quite aggressive. There's one in Double Bay where he's going in with his bayonet like this. And the one in Broken Hill, he's chucking a grenade like this, you know. And some are quite jaunty. Did you see the one with the four people where they're Forbes, you know, sort of marching together, quite jaunty? And it's the different emotion that communities have decided they wanted to project in their war memorial, commemorating, in some cases, just the people who died, in some cases, everyone who went away to fight. And in France, last thing I'll say, what you notice in France is what they often commemorate is not the diggers and females, nurses and so on, but often it's the families, the wives, the mothers, the children. And you see war memorials with the wife and the kids, and they're reaching out. Oh, and you saw the one in Geraldton with the mother looking out to sea, looking for the survivors, of which there weren't, of HMAS Sydney. Thanks, Joe. Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have a brief activity intermission. However, I'm going to finish the back end of the prep that precedes the drinks, because the next session is quite involved and a little bit longer, and I'm not going to come back and say anything after that. So after everything's finished, we're going to move next door to the exhibition hall for a networking evening, which is sponsored by Sydney University. So I'd like to acknowledge them, because we're all going to be very thirsty in an hour after the exercise that John's got lined up for us. The reception goes for an hour. There'll be a few words on the stage, followed by some entertainment. There's also a photo booth at the back corner where you can have your photo taken, and you can share that on social media if you so desire. After the networking drinks, there's an opportunity for delegates to meet the recommendations committee, who've been working hard behind the scenes, although that room is like, there's a clear glass wall there, so we've been able to see them the whole time. That meeting is being held on the boardroom on the ground floor. So I'll see you back at 8:30 in the morning. Right now we have John Dennehy. He's an exercise physiologist extraordinaire, and he's going to provide some exercises for us to do, because we've been sitting down for far too long today. Do you want me to hold the mic?
I should be all right. Well, now I don't need to introduce myself, but I will anyway. I'm John Dennehy. I'm an exercise physiologist. I live in Western Queensland, and at every event that I turn up at, I try and actually make sure people do a little bit more than what you're doing right now. So what I'm going to get everyone to do now, and I can see everything from here, is that I'm going to get you to stand up for me. And there's always a groan when I say that. All right, so what I'm going to get you to start doing now, we're going to actually start, all we're going to do is something nice, easy and simple that you can take home with you as well and do at work because you're sitting on your ass at work all day. If you're a nurse, you're not, just to save myself for the barrage that I'll get later from Julianne. So what I'm going to get you to start doing now, if you need to, hold onto the chairs in front for balance, but all I'm going to get you to start doing now is nice and simple, straight up and down off your toes. This is really nice and simple and easy, particularly for someone that has diabetes that needs to increase their blood flow to their calves, because we do actually need to increase our calf muscle pump to make sure we don't get peripheral neuropathy. Nice and handy. So what I do also want to get you to do now, finishing up doing that, putting your feet together. I'm going to get you to step directly to the side, not stepping on the person next to you. I'm going to get you to bend one leg and keep the other one straight and slide over. Fantastic. Ideally, we want to sit here for about 30 seconds, have a breather, and then go back into the stretch. But what I'm going to get you to do now, slide straight over to the other side. Fantastic. Now what I'm going to get you to do now, we are going to actually stretch the front of our leg. For those that can't actually do this, I'll give you a couple of options. Number one, if we're all going to turn to the side, we're going to go face that way. I'm going to get you to grab hold of your ankle and pull it towards your butt. Now, if we do already have the start of dodgy knees, what you can do is face me again and then hold the front of the chair and just put your ankle up onto the seat of the chair behind you. That way we're going to get some sort of stretch in the front of the leg, but we don't need to actually get enough range of motion to shove it up really high. Fantastic. What we're all going to do now is turn the other way, just so we still have balance because we don't want anyone to have a fall. We're going to grab hold of the leg and hold that there. Fantastic. Finishing up there, what I'm going to get you to do now, bringing your arm across your chest, holding your elbow and pulling it across the body. Ooh. Fantastic. Next one, same deal, arm across there, holding the elbow, pull it across. Now, because we now watch TV all the time, sit at our desk, stare at the computer screen, we're starting to get a bit of neck pain, a bit too much power through our upper trap. So what we're going to do now, we're going to put our nose to our armpit, have a nice smell, hold the back of our head and slowly pull it towards our armpit. And the other side for me. Now what I'm going to get you guys to do now is one hand holding the chair out in front, standing on one leg, and now we're going to reach for some butterflies. All in different directions. We want to actually try and increase our balance. If you're nice and young, we can then actually let go. Fantastic, guys. Thank you very much for indulging me. These guys look like they're ready to rock and roll. Talk to you later.
Thanks, John. Good work. Yeah.
I'll sort that out.
All right, well, thanks, John. That got us all moving again. For our last keynote of the day, I'd like to welcome Lucas Patchett and Nicholas Marchese to the stage. They're both the founders of Orange Sky. In October 2014, these two best mates had a crazy idea to put 2 washing machines and 2 dryers in the back of a van and wash and dry clothes for free. Nicholas and Lucas, the 2016 Young Australians of the Year, founded Orange Sky, a world-first free mobile laundry service for people experiencing homelessness. On a mission to improve hygiene standards, Nick and Lucas stumbled on something much bigger and more significant, the power of a conversation. Now facilitated by more than 1,800 volunteers, Orange Sky aims to positively connect the community. They've got 27 vehicles in 22 cities around the country, ranging from Splasher in Hobart, Mikey on the Sunshine Coast, Frosty in Canberra, or Lucky and Lottie in Perth. Please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you so much. What a remarkable privilege it is to spend this last section of the afternoon with you. I thought before we kick off, I might sort of go on from the theme of stretching and actually take you through the warm-up for the International Laundry Championships. And this happens in Denmark every year, where laundry boffins from around the world get together and they talk about their techniques. And when Lucas and I were starting Orange Sky up in Brisbane, we knew nothing about laundry. So we thought, well, how can we get some experience on laundry? So we actually typed into Google Brisbane Laundry Champions. And a lady who was actually the junior category who won in 2001 when she was growing up in Brisbane is in the room here this afternoon. We saw her on our way in. She was one of our first ever volunteers in Brisbane. Her name's Madeline Day. Where's Maddie? So we thought we'd get Maddie to come up on stage and we'd show you some of her techniques. Where's Maddie? You can't hide now. Maddie's definitely hiding. There she is. Let's clap Maddie up. Lucas having a bit of a project here. So while Maddie's coming up there, you okay, Lucas?
Yep.
Okay, I'll bring this here. Okay. All right. Lucas is...
I thought I was going to have to do it all myself. So.
So we're going to play this game called Baskets Up, Baskets Down. And it's all about getting the washing from the washing machine into the dryer, not mixing your colours, not straining anything. And it's all about having a good time. So very, very soon, we're all going to partner up. You can go as a 3 if there's even numbers, but you can't go by yourself. And the game is very similar to Simon Says, but we just copied it. So there's 3 simple options. Like this, hands by our side, we're looking at the washing machines. There's baskets up, hands on shoulders. Maddie's looking at the washing machine, waiting for the beeping sound, making sure we're not cooking anything too much. Baskets down, hands by our side, and basket swap. Now Maddie's in charge of the washing machine. So baskets up, baskets down, baskets up, down. Now, because this game is like Simon Says, and Maddie used to be good at laundry, you wouldn't do that. So I have to say the word baskets. This is a very bad example, but baskets up, baskets down, baskets up, down. There we go. Now, if you did say the word baskets and flinch, you'd be out, which is okay. It's just a little bit of a maybe shame thing. And you sit down, and then you become a judge. And what I reckon is that there are some people around the edges usually that get out and stay in. And then when you come down for the finale up here, we work out that you're all pretty bad at laundry. Yeah. Cheaters. Do we need one more example? Okay, baskets up, baskets down, basket swap. Baskets up, baskets down. All right, let's all partner up and go as a 3, and we'll work out who's the best at laundry. Thank you, Maddie.
Told ya. Yep, thanks. As well. Okay. Okie doke, here we go. Everyone's found a partner. We're going to do one practice round. If you don't have a partner, you can make like a 3, like a little laundry train. Don't be afraid. Make some friends. Okay, so here we go. We'll do one practice round because I heard last night was a pretty big party. So here we go. Baskets up, baskets down, baskets swap. Baskets up, baskets down, up. So if you just move, you would be out.
Okay.
You guys are in the medical field. You should be good at following instructions, hopefully. So, okay, this is the real deal now. So if you flinch, you have to sit down. You are out. But you become a judge, so you're looking for the cheaters who are sitting in the corners normally. Maybe some at the front as well hiding. Okay, here we go. This is the real deal. Baskets up, baskets down, baskets swap. Baskets up, down. If you just move, you are out. Again, being in the medical profession, I hope that there's a lot of honest people in the room. We're not talking to bankers or something like that. I don't know. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, sorry. Yes. Okay, here we go. This is the real deal still. Baskets down, baskets swap. Baskets up, down. Okay, you're out. Okay, baskets down. Baskets up, baskets down, swap. Wow. Just move you out.
Basket. You still playing? Yeah, one
Okay,
person.
we decimated. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. We're not going to get you to come up stage because it might take you 4 years to get here, but that's... Okay, here we go. Watching our... We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think. Okay.
This is prime cheating conditions,
Yeah.
so we need to...
Keep them honest up there, everyone. So, okay. Baskets up, baskets down, baskets up, baskets down, baskets up, baskets down, baskets up, baskets down, baskets up, baskets up. Oh.
Who's still in?
You're out, you're out, you're out.
Oh.
Oh, everyone
No
lost,
one
okay.
wins. Okay. Well done to the
Well done.
finalists. So conversations change our lives. You would have heard great sessions here today in the rooms around this centre, conversations in your workplaces, out in the field. And over the next hour, Lucas and I are going to share 6 conversations that without a doubt have changed our lives. And one of those chats happened for me growing up in Brisbane. I was home alone with my mum, Claire. My dad, Paul, was down in Sydney working, and my brother, Matt, was at swimming training. My mum came into my bedroom. It was pitch black. She said, "Nick, put your school uniform on. We're going." I thought it was a little bit weird, but I chucked my school uniform on and I jumped in the car. And I said, "Mum, where are we going?" And she said, "Nick, we're going on Eddie's van." And as soon as she said that, my heart sunk. Eddie's van was my school's food van that fed the homeless. I never met a homeless person. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. All these remarkably judgmental things were just running through my teenage brain. And we kept on getting closer and closer to the park in Fortitude Valley in Brisbane, and I just kept on getting more and more nervous. I just didn't want to be there. My mum jumped out of the car and I was sort of hiding in her shadow. And this big voice yelled from the park, "Claire." Thought that was a little bit weird. This man looked over my mum's shoulder and he said, "You must be Nick." I said, "I am Nick. Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Harry. It's a real privilege to meet you. How's your brother going at swimming training? Is your dad back from Sydney?" Harry was just like my uncle and my granddad. He had the same stories that went on and on and on forever. He had the same terrible jokes. But the difference is that Harry was sleeping on that park bench. And I can remember going to school that day and later that night with my family and thinking about Harry, what decisions he had or hadn't made, what positions he had or hadn't been in to put himself in that situation.
I want you all to take a second to just imagine. If it's possible to imagine that tonight, like Harry, you're actually homeless. What cash or little cash you're able to get together, you use to get some food so you're able to survive. So if you found yourself with a couple of bucks in your pocket, would you actually spend it on washing and drying your clothes? How high of a priority could that be when you're hungry, when you're cold, when you're scared, and really when you don't know where you're going to be from one day to the next? Well, the 2016 census found that every single night 116,000 Aussies had to make these sorts of decisions. Of that massive population, 56% were blokes and 40, hurry up mate. Come on. And 44% were female. So if you're really good at maths and you break that down across the whole population here in Australia, what that means is that tonight, 1 in 200 of us are homeless. Now, Nick and I found these figures so hard to comprehend, and we just wanted to find a way to help. After meeting people like Harry throughout high school, we're incredibly inspired to find a bit of a different way to help. We're inspired by that creativity and energy of people in our generation. So one day we hatched a crazy, crazy dream. Doing well, mate, doing well. What we wanted to do was improve the hygiene standards of the homeless. not really knowing what this looked like, we sat down in a cafe one day up in Brisbane, started throwing ideas around one day, and we stumbled on this really crazy idea. We were going to build a free mobile laundry service for the homeless. Sounded pretty simple. We owned an old van. We knew we needed some serious washing machines, so jumped on Google, typed in serious washing machines. The first company that comes up is a company by the name of Richard J. Laundry. Thought, this is perfect. They've got machines as small as that guy, but as big as this room. These are some serious washing machines. These guys can help us. So sent an email off to Richard J, started talking to one of their sales guys. He was talking thousands of dollars a month in leasing. If we broke the machines, we'd have to pay all these crazy excesses. Nick and I, 20 at this stage, were funding the whole thing ourselves, and these numbers were just simply out of reach. So we threw one last lifeline out to the sales rep at Richard J. We said, mate, we think that this is something that can really, really help people. Is there any chance that we can talk to someone a little bit higher up about some sponsorship or something like that? Just so happened that Richard J was a family-owned, nationwide, but Brisbane-based organisation. They agreed to a meeting. Nick and I rocked up to the meeting late in t-shirt, shorts and thongs, and we told this massive company about our little dream. We want to build a free mobile laundry service for the homeless. Do you have any machines that we can chuck in the back of our old van? Now, Carolyn, who's the big boss, this big washing company, sat across this big fancy boardroom and said, you guys are absolutely crazy. This is never ever going to work in the back of a van, and no one is going to use the machines in a park.
Now, at that point in time, and even still today for Lucas, unsure of how to use a washing machine, that's a joke, thanks for laughing. Lucas and I promised this company that was absolutely serious about laundry of our little dream, and invited them to participate in our journey, something that was thought to be crazy and impossible, but the crazy thing was they said yes. So now we had 2 massive washing machines and 2 massive dryers and no idea how they worked. But in the process of a few weekends, we managed to find a way to get these machines in the back of our van, and this is what we did. So there we had this van. It had 2 washing machines and 2 dryers in it. We had a massive generator on the back that was going to power everything up. We put a full tank of petrol in it, and we're ready to hit the streets of Brisbane. Except there was one small problem. I just got my license. So I was way too scared to drive this big van with trailer, so I threw Lucas the keys, and he was in charge.
So we jumped into the van. We hadn't done too much testing, but we thought, what better place to test than out on the streets? And what better place to start than alongside our old school's food van? The same van that we'd met people like Harry and all these people who are so important into shaping this van into what it was. So we jumped in the van, we drove down to the park. I mounted the curb, parked perfectly alongside the old school food van. I was in charge of setting the van up. Nick was in charge of finding some washing. So started going through the setup procedure, unwound the hose, went over to the council tap. There's a $12 tool you can buy from any hardware store around Australia that lets you steal water from the council. So started stealing water from the council, unwound the power cable, plugged the power cable into the generator, turned the generator on, big plume of black diesel smoke, put the wastewater hose out, and the van was almost ready to go. There was one final switch to flick in the van, and it was ready to go. Meanwhile, Nick had found some washing. There's a young guy by the name of Jordan had a couple of t-shirts, a couple of pairs of boardies in his backpack, and he was ready to be the first ever wash. The first morning was coming together absolutely perfectly. So I jumped in the van to flick the final switch, and all I heard was a massive bang. Turned to Nick, I said, don't think washing machines are supposed to make that noise. I might call up Richard J and ask. So I called up Richard J, had a phone number for a guy by the name of Dan. Now Dan is a washing machine tech, and I think he might be the world's angriest laundry technician. 2 weeks earlier, he said, this is never going to work, and when it breaks, I'm going to be the bloke who has to fix it. I called Dan, I was like, morning Dan, how you going? Turned the machines on this morning, made a bit of a weird noise, and now it says CE on the screen. What does that mean? So Lucas, that means critical error. You've broken both the machines. I told you that this wouldn't work. Now that point was a big testing time, I think, for Nick, for myself, and also for Jordan. We'd been added to that long list of people that throughout his life had let Jordan down and led him to where he was currently positioned. But Nick and I were determined to not make that list any longer, so I called up Carolyn, the big boss. I begged and pleaded, and for whatever reason, she agreed to give us 2 more washing machines. Went out that afternoon, dropped the broken ones off. Dan, these ones are broken. Sorry, mate. Thanks for the new ones. Took the new ones, installed the new ones into the van, and hopefully this van was all sorted. Except I was not allowed to touch the van the next morning, so Nick was in charge.
So I chucked my P-plates up on the van, got behind the wheel, nearly crashed the generator into the school's food van, started sealing water again, fired the generator up, big plume of black smoke. But there was Jordan. The previous morning, we had let Jordan down. Grabbed Jordan's t-shirt and shorts and a few other things, chucked them in that left washing machine, top button, bottom button, bang, CE. The disappointment on Jordan's face, on Lucas's face, said it all. This is something that had to work. And it was something that was going to work. So the same spot that Lucas called Dan the world's angriest laundry technician, I called Carolyn the big boss. Good morning, Carolyn. How you doing? Nick, how are those really, really, really expensive washing machines going? I said, Carolyn, it's going so great. Jordan was waiting for us this morning, and this is something that's going to work. We're going to stop funding it ourselves. We're going to register a charity. We're going to be an incorporation. We need 7 directors. Our mums are in, and we think you should be in. Got a lot of experience in running an Australia-wide laundry company, a lot of governance, a lot of technicians, a lot of good supplier relationships. Do you want to be in? And she was like, gosh, Nick, aren't you moving fast? No, Carolyn, Lucas is back to uni on Friday. Do you want to be in? Yes. Hey, Carolyn, was that a yes? Nick, that's a yes. Hey, Carolyn, what about 2 more washing machines? She had to say yes now, she was on our board. So we packed up, we apologised to Jordan, we went out to the workshop. Sorry, Dan, these ones are definitely broken. We went back to the drawing board, we were doing so much wrong. We weren't converting the power correctly, so we're frying the circuit boards. We weren't converting the water pressure right, so we're blowing all the solenoid valves out. We weren't putting the shipping bolts in, so every bump or knock Sudsy went over was cutting tubes or ripping wires inside the van. So back to the hardware store, 4 clamps, 2 hockey straps around the door, and Sudsy was hopefully fixed. So for the 3rd morning in a row, and for the 3rd day taking this frustrating van out, Lucas was in charge.
So we jumped back in the van. It was almost like Groundhog Day. It was the same time, same place. We drove down to the same park, parked in the same spot. And for the 3rd morning in a row, there was Jordan. And for whatever reason, Jordan was still willing to trust us with his only possessions in the whole entire world. So fired everything up, loaded the machines up, top button, bottom button, and everything started perfectly. Now that point was a massive sigh of relief for Nick, Jordan, and for myself. But we also had this moment of realisation. What do we do now? We've been so focused, so blindsided on getting this van to technically work. Once it did work, we didn't really have a plan for what was next. And it was incredibly simple. Jordan and I just started having a chat. And I'm confident that our conversation has changed my life, but changed the evolution of Orange Sky forever. Jordan went to school just up the road from me. He studied engineering at the same university that I was studying engineering at. He'd worked for some big engineering firms around Brisbane, but all of a sudden, he fell in some tough times, became disconnected from his family, from his community, lost his job, and he found himself sleeping on the streets in the blink of an eye. And I can remember thinking about Jordan and being so mind-boggled that someone who was almost a future projection of my life could be in that situation. Jordan was maybe 8, 9, 10 years down the exact path that I was on right at that time. And I just absolutely couldn't comprehend that that's where he was at. Jordan, though, talked about the positivity that he could already sense Orange Sky was bringing into that park. These two idiots for 3 mornings in a row had rocked up in this bright orange van, but that persistence to keep coming back and the determination to not let him down, Jordan could already sense was having an impact in the park.
So there we were in October 2014, wanting to do one thing, to simply wash and dry clothes for free. However, what we stumbled on the streets of Brisbane was a little bit more. We stumbled on that world first, something that connected the community, reduced transmission of really bad diseases, but most importantly, most simply, improved the lives of others. In our first 1 month of operation with our dodgy van Sudsy, with no working fuel gauge, no second gear, some unverified bank account, some website we made with Microsoft Word and crayons, we were lucky enough in our first 1 month of operation to receive over 2,500 unique donations from 24 countries around the world. But the coolest thing was, in our first 1 month of operation up there in Queensland, we were lucky enough to wash and dry over 300 homeless friends' clothes for free. And one of those first ever mornings, Lucas and I were just way too keen to find dirty laundry. So we got up nice and early, I picked Lucas up, and we went down along the banks of the Brisbane River. And probably to this day, some of the most desolate conditions I've ever seen anyone living in my own hometown. There was a damp mattress along the riverbank, there was a blue tarp held up by the mangroves, and there were 3 garbage bags that just absolutely screamed dirty laundry. And I can remember walking up to those garbage bags even more nervous than meeting Harry or waking up Jordan. I remember saying good morning, and there was dead silence. And I remember saying good morning, guys, and there was dead silence. I remember saying good morning, guys, I'm Nick. And 2 really remarkable people came out from that blue tarp, Mick and Natasha. Mick was struggling with a really bad hip injury. Natasha was struggling with her personal hygiene in that situation. And over the next hour, we were able to wash and dry all their clothes and eliminate those bad things like bed bugs and scabies and mold. But we also talk about the healthiness of the mind at Orange Sky, in constantly being damp, constantly being dirty, the impact that would have on all of our minds. We're able to raise that Orange Sky through a really simple thing, like washing and drying clothes. And this photo we took when we passed Mick back those clean, warm clothes from the dryer, he told me something that I'll never forget. He said, Nick, I have never washed these. And it was reminded to me that morning in Brisbane that there were people just out there in my own backyard that didn't have access to something that I took for granted.
The next conversation that really helped shape Orange Sky happened about 18 months after meeting Mick and Natasha. Now, Orange Sky had started expanding our Brisbane service, continued to grow, added more volunteers. We added a new van to Sydney, to Melbourne, started adding a few more vans and impacting a few more people. It's on that journey that we very quickly realised the biggest impact that Orange Sky would have wasn't just washing and drying clothes, it was actually sitting down and having a chat. Chats with Mick and Natasha, chats with Jordan were really the things that were central to the impact that Orange Sky was having. And I remember one day we were parked up in Gosford at the Central Coast of New South Wales, and we were, had been, I think it was our 10th or 11th van. It was the first shift that we were ever operating in Gosford. We're sitting up at this community centre, it was very quiet. First day that the van Tumbles was operating. We're sitting around for a little bit and we saw a car pull up and a a mum get out with her 2 daughters. She had 2 big bags of washing, and selfishly we were like, it's the first wash, this is really exciting. But what unfolded over the next hour and a half or so, I think really changed Nick and my life. We met Jo, who's an extraordinary woman based on the Central Coast, who's just having a bit of a tough time. And here's a bit of Jo's story.
It is so easy to go from being an awesome member of society to being on the street. It happens in the blink of an eye. I was renting a house and doing fine, paying $450 a week because that was all I could get. And I was fine. I was working part-time and looking after my kids as a sole parent. And then I lost my job in November because I injured my shoulder. And in that 3 months, I used all my savings to pay my rent and got a month behind in my rent, and that's all it took. And I went from living comfortably in a 4-bedroom home to living in my car. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to get emergency housing in a caravan park, but even that has its difficulties. You could be moved or you could be somewhere else. You'd never know where you're going to be in 4 to 5 days' time. And the community services that are there is the only thing that puts you between total desperation and managing. But if it was just me, I don't know. I think it would be very easy to give up if you're on your own. It is really important for the kids to feel like they've got some sort of normalcy. And clean clothes is the most basic of needs. To just be clean and comfortable. Everyone knows what a shower and clean clothes, how good it makes you feel.
It wasn't until after Jo left that it dawned on both Nick and I that it was actually a Thursday morning. And the reason that both of Jo's daughters weren't in school that morning is because they didn't have clean uniform. And I think what really resonated with us was the simplicity of washing and all the knock-on effects and benefits that can bring, but also the opportunity to just sit down on an orange chair, to feel safe, to feel heard, and feel connected.
Lucas and I are just 2 normal, everyday blokes, but we decided to challenge the ways we perceive and interact with the world around us through a really simple idea like washing and drying clothes. We believe as individuals, as communities, as practitioners, as Queenslanders, as Australians, it doesn't matter. To make the biggest impact in our communities, we must look at how we can do things better. And that's why I was a little bit sneaky and I just chucked in a few more slides that Lucas doesn't like. And this story, I think, is something that was so special to me in looking at the complexity of all these big words like innovation and entrepreneurship and all these different changing technologies and markets, and what does that look like for us at Orange Sky? And I think through our expansion and through technology and through all these loads of washing coming through, all those stories can be summed up by the story of this trike. And this trike is a story of a family who was having their first ever son. And they went down to the bike store to buy their son a bike, and they were bombarded with options for their soon-to-be son. And they said to the man behind the counter, "What happens when our son turns 3?" The man behind the counter said to the wife, "Well, it's very simple. You just throw out one of those and you buy one of those." And there was different shapes and sizes, different genders, different price tags. And they said, "Well, what happens when our son turns 4? And the man says, "Very simple. You throw one of those out and you buy one of those." And they thought, well, how can this be? Something that is so important to our son's upbringing is not going to last. So this is what they did. They built their own trike. But this trike had the same problems that every other trike did in that store. It would only last their son till 3. It was made from sustainable materials, it was gender neutral, but it would only last till 3. But this is what made their product different. they removed 2 parts. The exact same tree, the exact same transaction, the exact same little boy, something that was only going to last till 3 years of age would now last their son till 4. But this is where I think the idea is so clever. They flipped it. The exact same parts, the exact same tree, the exact same little boy, something that was going to only last that son till 3 would now last till 6. And I think when you look along this continuum of change, I'm constantly looking at my life and what things I can add and subtract, what things I can look at differently. But it's something we're constantly looking at Orange Sky. At Orange Sky, those tweaks to the bike are looking at how we can add layers of value to those conversations, whether they be through training people, whether it be through connecting people, whether it be through building resilience in our communities. How can we make those changes? And that's why about 2 years ago, we made a massive change to the Orange Sky bike. And we're driving this van down to the same park that only a few years ago, Sudsey was a disaster. We rocked up to the park and a gentleman by the name of Dave was there. And Dave said, "Boys, I love this. Can I have a go?" We said, "Absolutely, Dave, jump on in." Here is what Dave was up to.
It's a crisp August morning and Dave Bushy Schumann is enjoying his shower.
Beautiful.
Except this is no ordinary shower.
It was awesome, mate. It was hotter than Taylor Swift. You come here, you get your clothes washed, there's a barbecue across the road, you get in the shower, and somebody else sits down, they chin wag around there, and you get out and you're nice and refreshed and ready for the day. The sun comes out, awesome.
Having a fresh shower when you're homeless, it just changes you, it changes your day. It basically just enlivens you, it freshens you up.
It's a human need, and we all need to actually feel good about ourselves.
Following the success of Orange Sky Showers, we were lucky enough to launch a shower van in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. Orange Sky Australia now has 28 vans in operation all around Australia. Every week, those vans are run by over 1,500 incredibly compassionate and empathetic volunteers. Those vans go to over 283 locations at the same time, same place every week, like this morning at No Bucks Cafe. And those vans are never alone. They're working with amazing service providers, amazing drop-in centres, amazing counselling services to really deliver our mission to positively connect people. And that's where we see that value of better together is so strong within what we do at Orange Sky. Every week, these vans wash and dry over 8.5 tonne of free laundry, facilitate over 150 safe hot showers. Orange Sky to date has washed and dried over 900,000 kilos of free laundry, facilitated over 7,000 safe hot showers. But far from every shower given or t-shirt washed, the biggest impact Orange Sky Australia has had, or will ever have, are on those 6 orange chairs. To date, Orange Sky has facilitated over 180,000 hours of genuine and non-judgmental conversation. And each and every second of those conversations haven't only improved our volunteers' lives, but made our homeless friends' lives so much better. So imagine, if it's possible to imagine, that probably the majority of us in the room here who have never experienced homelessness before suddenly became homeless in a natural disaster.
They usually wash clothes for the homeless, but with residents here in Yeppoon unable to use their washing machines, their services are in high demand.
I've probably been in this stuff about 3 days. we're huddled in the back at the laundry, watching tin fly from A to B, and mate, you just don't know how bad it really was.
It could be weeks before power is restored to some areas of cyclone-ravaged central Queensland. So charity organisations like Orange Sky Laundry have come here to help make life just that little bit more comfortable.
Never ever seen a storm like that before. The rain, the lightning, the thunder. That one was quite a scary night. We didn't think we were going to have a house left.
Many people have been left with just the shirt on their back. Luckily for them, the team at Orange Sky have been driving around flood-affected areas with their laundry on wheels.
The Wilsons River peaked at 11.5 metres, the highest in 43 years.
Washing clothes isn't going to save anyone's life or fix anyone's home, but it can make that little difference that can just help people get back on their feet.
As the video mentioned, Orange Sky's now done over 11 tonnes of washing following natural disasters. And what we haven't updated in that video is the events of a couple of weeks ago up in Townsville. And following the floods up in Townsville, and we're lucky enough to mobilise 3 vehicles up into that community. We already had 40 volunteers on the ground. We brought in some volunteers from across Queensland to support what I think snuck up on a lot of people. And when talking to our team following the disaster, it was the first disaster that Nick and I hadn't been on the ground for. And I think we're really, really keen to debrief with the team on what were some of the standout moments. And there's 2 photos up on this screen behind me that were sent through from our team. And the first one on the right there is a really interesting story of this lady who called up our office one day and said, everything in my house is covered in mould, including my wedding dress, which has been passed through 3 generations of my family. This is a priceless family heirloom. Can you guys wash it? So, well, I don't know if you're supposed to wash wedding dresses, but we'll give it a crack. And this was the result. It came out absolutely perfectly. The woman whose wedding dress was absolutely stoked. And I think it reminded me of those little sentimental items that we all have in our wardrobe, be it our favourite t-shirt, be it our wedding dress. And then onto the photo on the right was actually a bit more heart-wrenching. His family rocked up and had this tiny little basket, and those clothes you see hanging up on that line were the last remaining items that this family had of their son who'd passed away just 3 months earlier. And I think seeing how such simple things on the surface can have such meaning to us, and how through such a crazy time like in a natural disaster, the impact that something as simple as laundry can have, I think is absolutely profound. I think it'd be remiss of me not to put this map up once more, and we're at the Rural and Regional Medical Conference, and point out a pretty special little dot up on that map to both Nick and I and to all of us at Orange Sky. And that's one right at the tip of Queensland, next to a beautiful community by the name of Lockhart River. Now, the journey behind this dot in Lockhart River started about 18 months ago, and it was in a room very similar to this. It was a medical conference down in Melbourne. This lady got up on stage, stood behind a lectern, and said, there's an epidemic happening in our backyard, and no one is talking about it. 2 in 3 kids before the age of 1 in Indigenous communities will contract scabies. Scabies can lead to so many bad health effects down the line, including kidney failure and even death. And it's something that's happening in our own backyard in epidemic proportions, and no one is doing anything about it. There's a few key parts to getting on top of this scabies epidemic. One is education, one is ointment to treat it, and the third one is then improving hygiene practices, the biggest component of which is laundry. And Nick and I were standing at the back of the room and sort of looked at each other and said, well, we know one or two things about laundry. Maybe this is something that we can help with. And that's really where the journey behind that grey dot on the map started behind me. And what that resulted in was months and months of conversation, consultation with the community, working with the local health clinic to say, well, what does an Orange Sky presence in an Indigenous community look like? And here is what we came up with. Is a beautiful truck by the name of Pytham, and here's a bit of the work that Pytham is doing up in Lockhart River.
Orange Sky is going to be a great way to address skin disease because of the washing of the clothes at a particular temperature. We'll be able to kill mites and things like that can live in bedding. And this will help eradicate skin disease and give kids the opportunity to come to school more often.
What people don't realise, it's actually going to be a good educational tool in many aspects of the community. It's going to be one of those tools that will connect, people with health, people with education. I think it's going to do a lot more than just wash clothes. Our mobile laundry, the Python, it'll add value in many senses, in health, in education, in community, in culture, and in people. I think that's important.
About 6 months ago, I was lucky enough to be in hot, humid Lockhart River. And once again, a conversation on a cheap plastic orange chair that I don't think I'll ever forget. And I was with this little dude, Archie. And Archie and I were hanging around the van probably for about 3 hours. And Ben, a colleague of mine, just kept on taking Archie's photo. Hour after hour, I thought either his memory card was going to be full or his battery would go flat. And I couldn't work out why Ben was just kept on taking photos of this little boy. And then it clicked with me, is that every time that Ben put the camera down, Archie went back to scratching the sores on his arms and his legs. Ben was just simply distracting him. And I think when you look at this ecosystem of an Orange Sky shift, a couple hundred Ks north of the tip of Australia, our small piece of the puzzle with our truck Pytham, generations of families, infected dogs, a tropical climate, I can't help but be reminded about what the mayor says in that video, is that we're all just people. And just like every garment that we put into our washing machines is different, every garment has a different texture, a different textile, different shape, a different size. Our garments too have imperfections, is just like us as people. We're all here today in different shapes and sizes, different backgrounds, and we too as individuals have our own imperfections. But when we come together, whether it be in Hobart or whether it be in Lockhart River, we communicate, we collaborate, and we connect, we can create some amazing things.
You want this, Nick?
No, you can talk to this.
So I think now we've it's a nice time to press pause, but just to finish up with really that evolution for us from a Orange Sky perspective, starting off with that want to just improve the hygiene standards of the homeless, to then growing and evolving into all these different shapes and sizes, to now a mission of positively connecting communities, really running through everything that we do, whether it be here in a metro city or up in a community like Lockhart River. So we've now got about 10 minutes for a few questions. If anyone wants to ask a question, we do have one most common question, and if you ask it to me, Nick will deliver you this orange peg for free. There's a few microphones hanging out there, or if you've got a big doctor teacher voice, happy to. Or someone beat you up here, I think, somewhere. So yeah, the question why the name Orange Sky, where'd the name come from? So Orange Sky is the name of a song that is by a British fellow by the name of Alexi Murdoch, and in his song Orange Sky, he talks about helping out your brothers and sisters and all of us standing underneath an orange sky together. For Nick and I, when we started, we're not politically, or we're still not politically or religiously affiliated. We like the name, we like the song, we like the colour. We chucked it on Sudsy and we haven't been sued, so that's good.
That's our most common question too, so I don't know how we're going to eat that pig, but...
No. You can come grab it after that, I reckon. Yeah. Okay. More questions? Okay.
Right up the back there, maybe?
Yep.
I think probably we didn't, and I still think we haven't unleashed the power of the stories. And right now there's vans out there with orange chairs every week, 1,500 hours of conversation take place. And even this morning, talking to a gentleman by the name of Craig here in Hobart, he was one of our first ever washers in 2016. And every week I think that conversations and friendships are captured, and we can try and get a book or a story or a photograph out, but it never captures the feeling of what happens on a shift. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges is how do we change stereotypes? And that was a journey that I think everyone is still on, and particularly myself, in preconceived ideas or whatever may be out there. But I think the only way to do that is to start a conversation. And I think as an organisation, what I'm proud of is that Orange Sky every day gives a voice to people that are sometimes judged by a minority group. So I think we probably like to think that we were good at making videos, or good at taking photos and add a background to that. But I think there's a lot to go in that space as well. And it's one of our challenges for sure.
And we did cheat on the video about Sudsy, because that's not actually Sudsy. That was the second van that we built. For Sudsy, we didn't film it because it took us way longer than that. So it's a hot tip, insider tip for you. I think there's someone up on the microphone up here, is there? Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Before I ask my question, I just want to say thank you so much for coming to this conference. You guys are absolutely inspirational. But my question is, how do I become a volunteer with Orange Sky in Townsville?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I suppose I might expand that question to how we all can support in the room today. So firstly, on that map, obviously we've got 28 vans. Currently, we're about to launch in Cairns. If anyone's from Cairns, we're looking for volunteers up in Cairns. But yeah, to join one of those teams is to jump online, orangesky.org.au. It's a really simple volunteering experience. You don't need to be a washing expert or a shower connoisseur. You just need to have a little bit of time and be empathetic and open to having a chat to people from all walks of life. The second way is I suppose through donating and through financially supporting. So it costs us $12 to deliver someone a load of washing on the streets of Australia. So that can all be done through the website. And the third one, which I think might help me out with the photo. The third one is next Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're doing our first ever Orange Sky fundraising campaign, and it's called the Sudsy Challenge. And what the Sudsy Challenge is all about you'll get one of these shirts sent to you which says, "Who is Sudsy?" It's a great conversation starter. But what it is challenging people to wear the same clothes for 3 days to start conversations, to raise some much needed funds and support people who are doing it tough in our community. So we've got about 1,500 people signed up already, but we need to double that by the end of this week to really make the campaign a success for us. So you can jump onto the sudsychallenge.com, or you can follow us on Facebook or anything like that to see all the information to sign up to fundraise and take a bit of a fun challenge into the weekend next weekend. So the three main ways you can support. Sorry for hijacking the question. Is there another question? Oh, down
There's
here.
one over here. But also, there's a lovely lady there that's got sunglasses on. She might put her hand up. Her name is Tess. Tess actually looks after our vans in Victoria and in Hobart. And one of the reasons we're in Hobart today as well is that we've currently got 40 volunteers here, and we need 80 to run the shifts that are needed. So another little challenge is while that you're in town, even though you might be complete strangers to this community, the challenge is when you're out on the town tonight to get another 40 volunteers. So we need to take over Hobart, we need to tweet, we need to do whatever, but we need 40 volunteers in Hobart. So feel free to go and tap people who are complete strangers on the shoulder out there tonight or tomorrow at the airport when you're getting a coffee in the morning, and tell them to register to volunteer, and they'll hopefully then we can help Tess out as well.
Nice one. Yep, we'll go over here.
Miriam Williamson, Aboriginal Health Council, South Australia. It's a fantastic, such an inspiring presentation. I just had a thought. With your shower vans, there's in Hunter Valley, there's some amazing Aboriginal women who developed soap from bush medicines, and they're finding that when they do that, that the children, when they wash with the bush medicine soap, all their scald sores and they're just, the skin, their boils are just limiting, and they're just, the skin's improving so much. What a great idea it could be if we could get the similar thing happening with bush medicine soaps for you to use. What sort of soaps do you use? I mean, what do you supply soap for when the people are showering, or?
I've answered a lot of questions, but sure. So we work with a few different suppliers for our detergents and for our soaps, but they're just sort of Brisbane-based organisation. It'd be awesome to have a chat about bringing some of those into a place like Lockhart River and as a starting spot, and then growing it out from there. But yeah, it'd be awesome to chat straight after if you come and have a yarn with us. That'd be great.
Inspirational, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe a question over here, sorry.
Hi. Actually, mine isn't so much a question, but we've just spent the last couple of days hearing about social determinants of health and how we can change, and changing social determinants of health actually changes our outcomes. And I think this is an amazing example of how you've started in such a small way and you have made such amazing, fantastic changes. I'm from Townsville. I've seen the change you made in the last few weeks. I thank you for the community connection on behalf of Townsville.
Is there a question up here?
Yep.
Louis got a question.
Just shout out, that's all good. On the mic.
I'm really excited to see that you're coming up to Cairns. I actually live halfway between Cairns and Townsville, and it's very low socioeconomic, and it's considered rural even though we're on the highway. And I'm interested to see, is there a way that we could bring the vans down to the support centres that I'm linked in with, either side of the cities, to support there?
Absolutely. The great thing about being on four wheels is that our vans can go anywhere, but it's also one of our current challenges is how we utilise our fleet to the best of the ability. So on average, our vehicles cost $140,000 to bring on the road, and what we know is that that's a massive investment for a community. So something we haven't been able to justify is that investment for a smaller community to be dedicated to that area, but also, say specifically here in Tasmania, a lot of people in an area like Launceston really need our service. So we're currently working on how we can deliver our service in a more cost-effective way, and whether that be through more of a not as mobile laundry service, or looking at how we can look at maybe potentially in a couple of years' time. I've got a theory that mobile laundry vans will be driving themselves, and overnight they'll move to different communities and rock up a couple of years down the track.
Okay. Any more questions? We can't really see up here if there's anyone up there. No more questions? Oh, yeah.
I had a question. So obviously you started with laundry and then you moved to showers. Is there anything else you're looking at exploring further for mobile use?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one we get a lot is looking at like what's next for us. And I think there's a few key parts that are next for us. One is now we've got 29 vans out there on the road. It's our challenge now to see, well, how can we make those vans more efficient? How can we make those donor dollars go further by actually not adding more and more vehicles, but actually adding more and more shifts. But obviously to do that, we need volunteers, we need areas to operate, and all these other challenges that come up. But from a cost perspective, it makes us more and more efficient, the more shifts that we add. So here in Hobart, over the last 3 months, we've gone from 4 to 8 shifts, and we're going to continue to push that to a busy service like Brisbane or Auckland has 15 or 16 shifts happening every single week, but at an incremental cost, less so for us. So I think that's one of our big next challenges. The second one is international expansion. So I mentioned there, Auckland came online in October last year, which is quickly becoming our busiest service that we operate internationally, and that really is a stepping stone for us internationally at looking at this is something that we've stumbled on that can really help people from all walks of life from all over the world, and New Zealand and Auckland is the first step in that. But one day we hope to have Orange Sky vans or something similar to an Orange Sky van popping up all over the world and assisting people. And the third way is, I think, through our remote services. So once we get that model right, we've currently got a van in Lockhart River and also Palm Island, and once we really nail that model of working in community, of collaborating with local health centre, of providing that employment opportunity for the locals, we can then scale that. We've got 10 communities at the moment knocking on our door saying they want it, but we just need to make sure that we're really, really comfortable with how it's operating and how we can scale that nationally.
So you're looking more at expansion, not adding more services, is that right?
Yeah. So better utilisation of our current fleet, and then a little bit of expansion internationally, and then also in remote communities as well.
Thank you.
But no more. The next idea might come tonight at the pub. I'm not sure. So. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Julianne. I'm wondering whether you've considered contacting any of the universities about undergraduate health professional students of all the different disciplines getting involved. A lot of them need to get experience communicating with people and learning those sort of skills as well.
Yeah, it's a great idea and something we've done in bits and bobs around Australia, and had an email this morning from a university having 8,000 students that wanted to do a placement, and I think what we want to do is continue what we know works, and what works is building friendships and being regular and reliable. So what's really important to our volunteering model is for that to be something that our volunteers commit to in any of us would do in building a friendship, and that not being a one-off interaction, one that's built on, but also is not driven by too many external motives. So we've seen some really amazing partnerships like with universities and research practitioners, one specifically with QMIR Berghofer regarding the process for killing scabies in a washing machine, or whether it be through health science groups or student nurse groups. But I think more broadly, it comes back to our mission, and that our volunteers aren't social workers, aren't counsellors, they're everyday people, but what they are is really good connectors. So we've seen some really amazing examples where universities have run programs in conjunction with our services, or we've been able to connect university placements with service providers. So a good example of that is at St Mary's House of Welcome in Victoria. We were able to connect La Trobe University to that service, and they've got a bigger opportunity for volunteering in a once-off research specific.
Cool. No more questions. We might wrap up with one little video and final thought.
When Nick and Lucas brought up the concept of throwing some washing machines and dryers into an old van and driving it around, my first reaction was, wow, that's a big idea. How on earth are you going to pull that off?
It's easy for us to make a donation to a great cause, and that's the easy bit, but never actually put the effort into making a difference to somebody's life. And that's what Nick and Lucas do every single day to a group of Australians that most of the rest of us would walk by and ignore.
They had to build trust. These people were being asked to hand over their most valuable possessions, their clothes, to these total strangers. They didn't want to be judged. Were they being sold something? Was this political? Was it religious? No. Their friends on the street loved the service.
Some of these guys and girls who live on the street, unfortunately, are ignored for 99% of the day. So a 1 hour time in the morning, afternoon or night with one of our really friendly volunteers can have a huge impact.
It's about knowing that someone cares. Yeah, it's all about knowing that someone cares out there.
And having clean clothes means that I can go on with my life and go to job interviews and have conversations with people on public transport without feeling ashamed.
These are two young 20-year-old, passionate, enthusiastic, inspirational young guys that have solved a simple problem in a very innovative way, promoting respect and just engaging in those homeless communities and giving them something that we all take for granted.
It's very daunting that there's homeless people all around the world, and we're the only people in the world providing free mobile laundry. So we hope to one day see Orange Sky Laundry helping people every minute of the day.
I think it's really warmed the hearts of so many people who now know that there are others out there who genuinely and deeply care about their well-being.
It is so simple, but has this ripple effect that can affect people's lives forever. And that's a bit of magic. What Nick and Lucas are doing is a bit of magic.
It's hope. It's all about hope. We get through the night, we get up in the morning, we're looking for whatever hope we can.
It's really as simple as that. And what Dave, that legend, says so well in that video, it's knowing that someone cares, and it's all about hope. And what I hope is that when people like Mick and Natasha or Archie wake up tomorrow morning or the morning after, they now know that there's a community of people all around the world that actively and deeply care about them. I hope through coming together at conferences like this that you can find those small changes to your bike, find how you can work better together in your communities, but know that the work that you do in each of your communities, even though they might be far and wide, the impacts that those communities have through conversations is remarkably significant. But most importantly, what I hope we take into tomorrow and the year to come is that we can all remind ourselves individually that we don't need a bright orange washing machine, we don't need millions and millions of dollars, we don't need thousands and thousands of hours. Each and every one of us can deliver hope, each and every one of us can care. We just need to remind ourselves about the power of an awesome conversation. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.